Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're now streaming to Facebook and YouTube. We have our city auditor here, Mrs. Spetnagel. This is a public hearing for our city tax budget, and I will turn this over to Ms. Spetnagel for her to present the public hearing. It's all yours.
Okay, so in front of everyone here today, we have a tax booklet that is the actual tax budget that will be taken over to the county auditor. And then included inside, I have a summary sheet for anybody watching live. If you do want a copy of this, we have extra copies in our office, or we'll have extra copies in our office available at any time for you to pick up. But what is a tax budget? It's a tax budget is a forecast of the next fiscal year, which is used by the county to appropriate or to apportion property taxes and local government fund shares to different counties and cities. It is not the city's operating budget, but under the Ohio law, the city must adopt a tax budget by July 15th, and we must do this public hearing. In the booklet that we have, it starts off talking about the general fund. And the first thing that you're going to notice is the general fund revenue. So you're going to see local taxes. It's kind of broken down into little blocks of information. I'm just going to point out the main things because this could take forever if I go through line by line. And if you have questions, I can stop and answer them. But the main thing for the revenue is currently for 2022, I'm expecting an increase of revenue of about $685,000 or 3%. Now, one thing to note, that seems like a large amount of money, but with COVID, it's been really hard to estimate. And this year, we do have lower estimates based upon the fact that income tax is coming in from 2020, where a lot of people were laid off. So we have a lower estimate this year. Next year, that should bounce back up. So that's going to offset that a little bit. It's actually fairly comparable to what we received in 2020. So if you look at the first column, that is the actual numbers for 2019. And then the second one is your actual numbers for 2020. Third is where we currently have, I can hold this up just to show you guys. The third column is what we actually have projected today. This will change as the year goes and I continue to review revenue. Those numbers will change, but that's where we are as of today. And when we get to the expenses, those numbers will be the budget today based upon additional appropriation. And then the last column is the projection that I'm estimated for 2022 currently. So if you look at municipal income tax, you can see I've got a budget or a projection in there of 12 million, and in 2020 it was 12 million. So it's very comparable. It's just not comparable to 2021 because we have a very low estimate right now based upon the unknown. So overall, down at the bottom of that page, you'll see total revenue for the general fund 2019, 2020, and 2021. We have around 21 million in there, except for in 2020. That's got a lot of transfer money in there and some maturity of investments built into that. That's why that number is so large. It's not true revenue that we didn't get a large amount of revenue that boosted us up to $25 million. So for 2022, we've got an average in there of about $21 million. And that's just for the general fund alone. If you turn the page, that gets into the general fund expenditures. And this is grouped kind of odd. So police and fire are the first group of expenditures. If you look at, it's broken down by groupings of personnel services, which is your salaries and your fringes, travel and transportation, contracts, supplies and materials, and then capital. For the police and fire, I have a total expenditures of $11 million. That does not include the police and fire pension fund that gets transferred into the police and fire pension fund. And it does not include their capital because that's included in special revenue. And we'll talk about that a little later. The next group is the planning and commission. Their budget's very, very small, $525. Last year they spent 64, and the year before that they spent none. Towards the bottom of that second page is the refuse recycling department. We have a total expenses of 1.3 there. And then the next page goes over to streets and sidewalks. That's the electricity bills for the city that gets paid out of the general fund. And then lastly, for the general fund, it's all other departments. That group is the mayor, the auditor, everything that's not, that doesn't do real services like the fire department, police department, or charge for services. One thing to note in all of that section of expenditures, the main decrease that we have is for capital outlays. I have actually have a projection of a decrease in expenditures of about 139. I have, like I just said, that's mostly capital decreases. Last year we had a lot of COVID expenditures that we spent that increased that. This year we have 172,000 is for a garbage truck that's already included in the budget, and that will not be included in the 2022 budget. So that's why there's a decrease there. Overall, we show an ending fund balance next year of 2.3 with a balanced budget of 1,042. So then if you turn to page 6, there are the municipal court funds. The next page is the police and pension funds. The police and pension funds, those are based upon strictly payroll. There's a 2% increase in there for payroll increases. Those numbers are strictly based upon payroll, and there's nothing and transfers into that from the general fund. Nothing too specific there. Then if we turn to page, the special revenue funds, it's this page, there's no page numbers, but it's right where your staple would be. This is all the special revenue funds, your street construction, state highway, parks, grants, the transit department, debt service, and all the capital funds. So what we do is we take a look at where we currently stand with unappropriated funds, try to estimate where we're going to end at the end of the year, and that becomes our beginning fund balance. And then estimate the receipts and the expenditures and come up with what we project at the end of the year fund balance will be at 2022. Now, if you can imagine estimating a whole year's worth of revenue and expenditures in advance before we've met with departments is kind of difficult. So this is definitely just an estimate without any type of meanings to really go into detail what these numbers will actually be. The next group after that is the debt that we will be paying for 2022. It lists individually all the items that we currently have debt for. It shows that at the beginning of the year we'll have a balance of $9 million, paying down 1.3, leaving us debt balances of $8 million. One thing to note about this section, it does not include any debt that we'll incur for the sewer plant or any future debt that we've got coming up. I talked to the county auditor and he suggested not putting those numbers in here because we don't have the exact details of those. And since it's not finalized, not to do that. The sewer plant could actually be based upon a drawdown basis. So that would change the amount that we'd pay each year, not to include those in here. So those have not been included in there. So this will change eventually as soon as we get those projections. So that is all. The next few pages are not applicable to us, but that is what the tax budget looks like. And then I have the summary sheet if you want to review that, and I can take any questions. One thing to note is that this revenue adjustments could still be adjusted upwards or downwards based upon quarterly reviews. I've already stated that. And then the expenditures could change based upon additional appropriations throughout the year. Any money left over from this year will roll back into unappropriated balances, and that could change these numbers as well because that would increase the amount of resources we have available. Any questions?
Good job of presentation. We have no questions. Thank you. That ends the public hearing for the tax budget for 2022. And it actually is on our agenda tonight. We'll go back to the mics off and go to the seal till our actual meeting starts here at 7 o'clock. Thank you, folks. they're also.
Limestone Hill, like
Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, council members, city officials, and our streaming audience. I'd like to welcome you to the July 12th City Council meeting. We have 3 items on our agenda this evening. We are meeting here in chambers with limited and restricted public attendance for your safety, but we are meeting with public attendance, and we are streaming live to Facebook and to YouTube. At this time, if you would, Ms. Fleckner, please continue with the roll call of members.
Thank you, President Arnold. Phillips?
Here.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis?
Here.
Gillum?
Here.
Shoemaker?
Here.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Here.
Mrs. Payne is absent this evening. Do I have a motion to excuse her by Mr. Prohl, seconded by Mr. Shoemaker? Roll call on the motion to excuse Mrs. Payne.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
And Mrs. Payne has been excused this evening. If you all would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. The minutes for the previous meeting have been distributed for review. If there's no corrections, additions to the minutes, do I have a motion to accept the minutes as they are? By Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
Alrighty, so the minutes have been accepted as read. We will move now to committee reports, and we will begin with Mr. Phillips. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Phillips. Community Affairs.
Thank you, President Arnold. This evening, Community Affairs does not have any agenda items, and at this time, nothing new to report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Moving on then to Human Resources. Mrs. Payne is not here this evening. I don't know if she gave anybody a report to give. I don't think she has any open assignments right now. We'll move on to Development. Ms. Nickerson.
Thank you, President Arnold. Development has nothing on the agenda tonight, therefore we have nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. From there, we will move on to Finance. Mr. Prohl.
Finance has 2 items on tonight's agenda. The first is item number 1 at first reading, and it is an ordinance appropriating funds to cover an increase in the cost of citywide insurance policies and declaring an emergency. I will ask the auditor, do we need to go ahead and waive the 3-read rule for the insurance? And I will ask that we also waive the 3-read rule at the appropriate time so that this can be passed. We also have item number 3 on tonight's agenda. This is a resolution adopting the tax budget for the city of Chiillicothe, Ohio, for the calendar year beginning January 1st of 2022 and submitting the same to the county auditor and declaring an emergency. And again, at the appropriate time, I will be asking that we waive the 3-read rule so that this can be passed in a timely manner. And that concludes the finance report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prohl. Moving on, we will go to Parks and Recreation. Ms. Corcoran. So you'll hit your button for that. You just push the button till it turns green.
Now
There
it
you
is,
go.
okay.
All right.
Good evening. I don't have anything to report other than we did have a meeting this evening, and that legislation will be presented at our next council meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Corcoran.
Mhm.
And we move to engineering at this point, which would be Mr. Shoemaker.
Thank you, President Arnold. Engineering Committee does have item number 2, which is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating funds in the amount of $88,000 for the city's reimbursement to Sunrush Enterprises LLC for infrastructure improvement expenses in accordance with Ordinance 70-2 and declaring an emergency. And I will also ask at the appropriate time that we waive the 3-read rule so that we can pay this in as soon as possible. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shoemaker. Moving on to safety service, Ms. Gillum.
Thank you, President Arnold. Tonight, Safety Service doesn't have anything on the agenda. We did, however, have a committee meeting before tonight's city council meeting, and there will be several items that will be on our next regular city council meetings agenda. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Ms. Gillum. Now, city service and transit, which is Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, President Arnold. City Services has no items on the agenda this evening. We did have a prior committee meeting since last council on regards to 21-052, 054, and 056, which have been turned into law director to be on next legislation for next council meeting. We also had a meeting prior to this discussing 21063, which will also be on next council meeting's agenda. Other than that, I don't really have committee news, but I have Fifth Ward news, and that is that the 5th Street Water Tower looks very nice, freshly painted. So congrats to the utilities department and water department and how nice it looks up there. And I know it's been a long project, so good job. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. And last but not least, we have Councilman for Utilities, Mr. Tapman.
Thank you, President Arnold. The Utilities Committee does not have anything on the agenda tonight, and actually, I don't have anything new to report. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tapman. From there, we will move on to our mayor, Mr. Feeney.
Thank you, President Arnold. I'll report on tonight's brief agenda. I'd like to ask for council's support, passage of all 3 items tonight, waiver of 3-read rule on all 3 items. Especially item number 2, which is something that council actually considered last year, and I believe consented to last year, just was an appropriation that needed to happen. And of course the tax budget, and thank the auditor for her work compiling that, especially in what's been an odd 24 or 18 months to budget, to say the least. So I'd ask for favorable votes on those items tonight. And then just a few items to report in city business. Large item pickup is now complete. Hopefully, after a year where we weren't able to offer large item pickup, that was something that citizens were able to take advantage of. I'm sure we'll all appreciate not seeing large items in front of houses anymore for another year, but I think council can expect at some point within the next several months a conversation about how we approach large item pickup in the future. This year, maybe more than most, I think I was cognizant of, and we did receive some variety of calls just based on the appearance and the sort of difficulty on the management side of sort of making sure compliance is appropriate and that sort of thing. It's a similar consideration, one that Jeff reminds me about frequently, Safety Service Director Carmen, the Rennick Avenue yard waste site, where we're able to offer something, and it gets a lot of use. I myself took advantage to, I think, 3 trips on Saturday, but it does get abused to some extent too. And I think there's a balance that we need to strike, and I think council can weigh in on both those items in the coming months to make sure we continue to offer great service and services to the community, while making sure that city stays clean and that we're also not taken advantage of. And thanks to the refuse department and everybody that really has to do a lot of extra work during those 5 weeks to get that stuff picked up and keep the sidewalks clean. I'd like to offer just information to council and thanks to some folks on the city side for a couple of grants we put in recently. We have applied for a COPS grant, which we've been a couple cycles without receiving. The grant application was pulled together by Captain Short, Transit Director Powell, our intern through MORPSI, our Ohio University intern who's come to us through MORPSI, and our intern from last summer who's back working in an administrative part-time seasonal function for us. And so they pulled together a really nice application for us wherein if we're successful, we'll be able to increase our police staffing through that grant by 4 officers. And I think we should know by fall if we're successful in that. And I think that would be for a period of 3, perhaps 4 years. Similarly, team of Director Powell and the 2 young interns and former intern helped pull together an application for it's a grant for supporting social determinants of health. We wrote it around supporting planning within the community, tying together various agencies to sort of look at and build out community planning in a way that supports activity. As many of you know, Ross County ranks, I think, in the lowest 10% in terms of health outcomes in the state. The state of Ohio is behind the rest of the country, and so they helped pull together a really nice application that would support some staffing around planning. So those 2 applications were submitted within the last, I think, since our last meeting. So we've had some busy folks internally. Today, the 2021 summer paving program began with curb ramps. So for probably a couple weeks, you'll see the installation of ADA compliant curb ramps. For those that aren't familiar, our practice is, as we are milling and filling or upgrading streets, any street that is on that list, we take the opportunity to improve the accessibility at those intersections by installing ADA compliant curb ramps. So eventually we will have a city full of ADA compliant curb ramps. Some places you'll even see, I think Bridge Street is maybe the most obvious example, curb ramps to nowhere. Someday we'll have sidewalks to support those curb ramps. And then paving then will start within the next couple weeks after those curb ramps. And then the last thing I want to report on is kind of fun. So over the past 9 months, the transit system has been involved in an innovation track that's been supported by Harvard University and Bloomberg Philanthropies, wherein we have a team of about 10 to 12 city employees, a council person, have been sort of redesigning and rethinking about our transit system. Our stated goal is to be a best-in-class rural transit system, meaning that we are providing a service in transportation that really delivers for all of our community residents and fills the needs of the community. Is not just built, and then sort of the community has to adapt to services. We have a great transit system, I believe, as it stands now. When this process is over, I think everybody's going to be excited to see what we've come up with. Within that transit system, there are 2 prototypes being tested over the next 2 weeks. There's actually a prototype being tested this week, which is prototyping an on-demand system, which is similar to an Uber type system. We have an operable app, and that is going on now. And then the team that I've been a part of next week is prototyping on Thursday and Friday a downtown trolley. So on Thursday and Friday of next week, this is the way this works is that it all happens and it comes together pretty fast. The next Thursday and Friday of next week, and more details to come, we will be prototyping a downtown trolley, which would be eventually, if successful and possible, a part of the Chiillicothe transit system. So I will be. You can look on social media through emails for more details around that. But that downtown trolley on next Thursday and Friday would be open to the public, and we taking some surveys and hoping to get excitement, enthusiasm, questions, and feedback around both the on-demand system, which is going on now, and that trolley system. And then the last thing, which I mentioned to President Arnold, and I'll just report on, particularly from the administrative side or the administration side, is that effective July 1, the legislation, the state legislation that allowed for any sort of remote public meetings expired. So going forward, any type of administrative or administration-related meetings, so that would be Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Commission, Design Review Board, those sorts of things, those are back to being in person and reverting to the traditional sunshine law rules. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I didn't get a chance to see the fireworks, but I'll ask. I heard they were fantastic. Is that pretty much the consensus?
I can confirm they were fantastic.
Okay, that's great.
Well, and that gives me an opportunity to thank everybody that was a part of making the return to fireworks this year safe, first and foremost, fun for everybody to get out. It seemed to me that there were more people than ever downtown and around downtown. Thanks also to Parks and Recreation Director Bill Bonner and Clint Boggs and Parks and Recreation, the pool party, which, like any party, requires a lot of planning and lots of hot dogs and energy, went off without a hitch as well. So going into that, we were dealing with a warranty issue on a fairly significant motor related to the pump for the pool. That was resolved before the pool party on Sunday. So there's, I think, a little bit of stress related to that week, but thanks to all that were involved in making it a fun and memorable and safe night.
That's great. I hope everybody had a great 4th. Moving on, we'll move to our auditor, Mrs. Spetnagel.
I have one item on the agenda tonight. It's a resolution adopting the tax budget. This is a forecast of next year, which is used by the county auditor to apportion property taxes and local government fund shares. It's required that this be passed by July 15th, so I ask that that gets done tonight, and it is required by law that we have a public hearing, which we did hold prior to this meeting. But one thing that I forgot to talk about during that public hearing, and to it's kind of exciting. We've got a grant from an organization that's helping us build a module that will help us create a 10-year budget. That's something that the city's never had. So for the last couple of months, the mayor and I have been meeting with a consultant trying to get this module completed. And it's kind of cool because we have the availability to use a lot of resources, and they have a lot of connections that can help us come up with better projections of what's going on, around us as well. So once that module gets done, I do want to bring it in here and kind of go through it with you and show you, because it'll be pretty interesting to finally have a 10-year budget. available. So that was one thing that I forgot to mention. You will be getting the June financial statements. I email those out monthly. You'll be getting those by the end of this week, probably tomorrow. I just want to give you a heads up on that. So if you review those and you have any questions, feel free to call me. And then lastly, I did submit a committee assignment. We did apply for the American Rescue Funds. So we need to have a committee meeting to discuss how those will be spent. But really, the committee request is just to be able to accept and appropriate those funds and to be able to, it's required that we create a special fund to account for those. So that's really what the committee request for is just to make sure we get that committee request, that special fund set up. And then that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Spetnagel. Moving on, our law director is not in attendance this evening.
First,
Yes.
she just asked me to report that she did not have a report tonight to give.
Okay, okay, that's fine. All right, thank you, Ms. Villarreal. And then it moves to me, and I don't have anything to report other than saying I'd hope everybody had a good 4th. From there, we move to audience participation. We do have a rule that limits speakers to 5 minutes with a total limitation of 15 minutes per subject. When you get close to the 1 minute, I will indicate to summarize your presentation. Anybody that wishes to speak, we do need to have our name and address for our records. At this time, I'm not seeing but one person in attendance in our tonight. And if you would like to speak, hey Jeff, could you put the microphone over for her like we did? I'm sorry. And just, I hope it's turned on. Doesn't have battery. Okay. Just any of them. Seal, if you would hand your microphone to him. I'm sorry.
That one. My name's Melody Lapsinski. I live at 355 Brennan Road, Chiillicothe, Ohio, 45601. I just wanted to give you yet another Purple Heart update. Again, thank you so very much for all that you did to get through this process. I am moving forward and have been talking to different veterans organizations. I'm talking to the Veterans Commission and the Veterans Council. I am pursuing different venues with them as to placement of a monument. It looks like we will be able to get one put in, whether it be over at the Veterans Park or if I have to talk to Parks and Recreation about possibly the head of the park where the Doughboy is. I've never been over there. I don't know what a Doughboy is. But anyhow, I'm looking at those avenues in conjunction with the Veterans Council and the Veterans Commission, and I just wanted to keep you appraised of that. Unless anybody has any questions. No?
Okay. Thank you very much for giving us that update. And Jeff, thank you for doing that for me. I'm sorry.
President Arnold, I did have one thing that, following up on Councilwoman Lewis's report on the water tower.
Yes.
She, I think, humbly forgot to mention that she actually was the graphic designer behind getting that logo on the water tower. So I just want to thank her for lending her pro bono services to the city. Or maybe, I guess she's not pro bono. In her role as councilwoman, she went the extra mile for her ward. So
I'll have to drive up by and take a look at that.
It looks really nice. Yeah.
I was by while they were painting it, but with all the construction and stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. Sounds good. Okay. Next thing you know, there'll be a line of cars that'll just keep streaming by that water tower up there. Yeah.
That pumpkin will have nothing on us.
Yeah. Very good. Sounds good. Thank you. Moving on to old business. Does anybody have any old business they'd like to bring up? No? Petitions and correspondence received by the clerk. Have you received anything, Ms. Fleckner?
Yes, I have. We're in receipt of a liquor license application transfer of ownership received on June 29th. It's for Thomas R. Lee Master, DBA Giovanni's Pizza, walk-in cooler and patio at 423 Western Avenue. Transferring to Miles Chiillicothe LLC, DBA Giovanni's Pizza, walk-in cooler and patio at 423 Western Avenue. Are there any objections to this application? Thank you.
No? Okay, thank you. Any new business that anybody would like to bring up? Okay. Committee assignments and meeting dates. Does anybody have any meetings that they're wanting to call for that are coming up? We covered quite a bit of things this evening. If not, I'll real quickly try to go through the assignments that have come out since the last meeting. Safety Service, an increase of hours for the part-time law director clerk in the law director's office in emergency situations. Finance, to appropriate funds to cover increase of citywide insurance policies, and that's on tonight's agenda. Finance, a request to adopt a tax budget, and that for 2022, and that's on tonight's agenda. Safety Service, appropriate $15,000 to safety levy capital. Fire, to budget for fire station repair bills and improvements. Excuse me. Safety Service, to accept and appropriate $3,807.36 received from high-intensity drug trafficking areas, and that is a reimbursement for overtime. Safety Service, appropriation for $53,460 to Safety Levy Capital Police to pay for the 2021 Axon bill. Transit, request to accept and appropriate CARES funding allocation for the Transit Department. And Safety Service, appropriation for $900 for the Safety Levy Fire Department for a refrigerator for station number 4. And that's been the assignments that have come out since our last meeting. At this time, we move on to the reading of our agenda, our legislation. And Ms. Fleckner, whenever you're ready, we will start off with item number 1.
First reading of an ordinance appropriating funds to cover an increase in costs for citywide insurance policies and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Roll.
At this time, I would ask that we please waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on the motion to waive.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
And the motion has been accepted. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
And that item has passed. Item number 2, please.
First reading of an ordinance appropriating funds in the amount of $88,000 for the city's reimbursement to Sunrush Enterprises LLC for infrastructure improvement expenses in accordance with Ordinance 7002 and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Shoemaker.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd ask that we waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Gillum. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
That motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. And item number 1 was an ordinance as well. On to item number 3, please.
First reading of a resolution adopting the tax budget for the city of Chiillicothe, Ohio for the calendar year beginning January 1, 2022, submitting the same to the county auditor and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Prohl.
At this time, I would ask that we please waive the three-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips,
Yes.
Nickerson, Tatman, Lewis,
Yes.
Gillum,
Yes.
Shoemaker,
Yes.
Corcoran, and Prohl.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips,
Yes.
Nickerson, Tatman, Lewis,
Yes.
Gillum,
Yes.
Shoemaker,
Yes.
Corcoran, and Prohl.
Yes.
And that resolution has passed. So, unless anybody has anything they would like to add to the evening,
Mr.
Um,
President, I would like to make a motion for an executive session to discuss the purchase of property.
I have a motion for executive session, seconded by Ms. Lewis. Mrs. Lewis, roll call on that motion.
Phillips,
Yes.
Nickerson, Tatman, Lewis,
Yes.
Gillum,
Yes.
Shoemaker,
Yes.
Corcoran, and Prohl.
Yes.
We're moving into executive session. I'll put the seal up on the screen, and we will be coming back here shortly, folks. Thank you. Okay, we've had our executive session. We're ready to come out. Do I have a motion to come out of executive session? By Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Roll call on the motion to come out of executive session.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
And if there is nothing else, that concludes our business for this evening. Do I have a motion for adjournment by Mrs. Lewis, seconded by Ms. Nickerson? Roll call for a motion for adjournment.
Phillips?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Shoemaker?
Yes.
Corcoran? And Prohl.
Folks, we are adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.